Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 2017 DreamHack Austin Hearthstone Grand Prix. We started the day with over 200 players who've been playing through 5 total rounds of Swiss throughout the day, and we have 1 more round left to go. My name is TJ. I'm joined by Noxious and the Admiral. That's admirable. And we're about to bring you round 6. There's going to be 9 rounds total. We're going to play 3 tomorrow, but round 6 of the day. And, man, these guys have been jamming some games all day long, guys.
Yeah, I don't even know how they're staying focused, honestly. Like, it's been... Swiss is the most demanding format, I think, for the focus of players, just because of the sheer amount of games you're jamming in one session. It's really intense.
Yeah, the other thing to think about is that you have a lot of guesswork to do between rounds, finding out information about what decks are floating around near the top of the bracket for those who are still in the running, and then being able to remember all of that, still have your focus, remember to relax a little bit. There's a lot going through your head as you compete all day long. For some of these players, they've been here since like 9, 10 a.m.
Yeah, the deck lists are a mystery until you get to the top 16. Top 16 is where we reveal deck lists. You know, out of fairness, some players have been streamed, some players have not been. But up until then, it's all about like going to your little practice pods and like, what decks does this guy run? What decks does this guy run? And just trying to talk to everybody you can and trying to acquire that information. It's exhausting, man. It is exhausting. I'm exhausting watching them run around like,
yeah,
whew, I need to sit down and have a snack.
Well, you've done a lot of casting today.
I've been doing a lot of snacking today, too.
That's exhausting. Snacking is really tiring if you're TJ.
Yeah, everything's really tiring if you're TJ. I'm a fat old man.
It's one of these days for TJ, so please forgive him. It's all right.
Yeah.
We love you.
Thank you, son. It's been a long day. But yeah.
I'm here with you, Dad. It's all right.
Going into round 6 of Swiss, what do we have to expect? Who do we see playing? It's TidesofTime versus HotMEOWTH, I believe. It's going to be a future matchup on stream.
It is. HotMEOWTH player who made it to the top of BlizzCon almost last year.
Yeah, we don't really talk about that. Whew. He had the most stylish exit from the BlizzCon main stage at the 2016 World Championship.
Yes and no, depending on what aspect you're looking at.
Yeah, he brought the Arcane Giant Blood Warriors Warrior deck, a deck that was given to him and helped prepared for with Rage, who's another player that's actually competing in DreamHack Austin. And he swears by this day that that deck is good. It was good.
It was a good deck. Rage, you know, he had tons and tons of games on that, and he's the one who created that concept. And it was a very difficult deck to play. It's one of those weird combo decks where you have to understand every single situation you're in. It's one of those decks, you don't just pick it up, practice a couple games, and go, huh, I'm good with it. It takes a lot of focus, and especially on a stage where, you know, I spoke to HotMEOWTH afterwards. He's like, honestly, I don't even really remember what happened. I was kind of freaking out. It was a lot of pressure. There was a ton of money on the line. And here in this round, I don't really expect that from him. He's had a lot of camera time. He's had a lot more practice. Not a ton at stake in this round, but it's starting to get to that point. These are the rounds where people can put themselves in great position for top 16.
Yeah, he's also got picked up by a team since then, Panda Global Gaming as well, as you can see by his little jersey there, joined also by Ray C, who's another player that participates in a lot of these North American Open events, these big open events, who's had some success. Recently had some success at, I believe, PAX East was the event that he won earlier on this year. Wasn't the Angoro meta, but definitely a player he's a super grinder.
Yeah, he really is. That guy's hungry for more wins alongside HotMEOWTH, who I'm sure is looking to duplicate his performance from last year. But when you're talking about historic performances, TidesofTime has quite the list of them under his belt. And he took a long hiatus from Hearthstone, but since Angoro has come out, this guy has been an absolute machine when it comes to grinding Hearthstone. He's been putting in a ton of hours. He started picking up his stream again and started putting long hours there. He likes building decks and he likes brewing with them. In this match, I haven't heard a ton about his decks thus far. He's been a little bit quiet about it himself. But when it comes to TidesofTime, you always expect a surprise.
Yeah, and I want to say I'm kind of sad the Shaman's banned out, because I know that TidesofTime built a lineup that targeted aggro more so than the other way around. HotMEOWTH, however, is running a ton of aggro decks, and as a result of hearing probably about the Shaman deck, chose to ban it, as it is a control deck running the whole self-healing package. So that's the type of deck that I would have loved to see on stream. However, we're going to probably stick to Jade Druid and a little bit of a slower control paladin.
For sure.
You okay?
These guys, I believe they have the same 3 classes, right? As far as the classes that were left up for the series. With Paladin, was it Paladin, Rogue,
and Druid, yeah, on both sides.
But we're going to see completely different styles from both these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I expect Aggro Druid from HotMEOWTH, as this seems in line with the general class selection that he's got and the ban that he did.
All right, well, the match is getting close. So I'm going to go down the line, get your guys' predictions. Who's going to win this match? Admirable.
I'm going to go with Tides of Time in this one. I think that there's a lot of room still left for deck building. I think we're early on in the metagame, and the aggro decks, they're very good, but they're not necessarily refined. And this is really where Tides starts to thrive as a player, is when he's able to hard target players who have unrefined decks.
Noxious.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the same thing. Exactly. When it comes down to deck building, I feel like Tides of Time's got a lot more experience in that round.
All right, well, we will see. Round number 6 is getting underway. It's been a long day here at the DreamHack Austin Grand Prix, but let's get it going.
Cheerio, indeed. Oi, mate. Jolly fun tournament, that.
I don't know why your accent suddenly changed, but
It happened.
that's what
It
happens.
happened. A Murloc. It's a Murloc Paladin. Anyway, going
So
forward.
we're headed the rest of this cast. It's a long day.
This is where the cast is headed, ladies and gentlemen. We're swapping accents on the fly, because we have to.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that up to him. I'm just going to talk as I normally talk.
Yeah, it's all right, Admirable. You've got the American accent. You love your America. And on that topic, whoever wins this makes you happy.
Well, you know, these are two good friends of mine. I love watching these guys play. Tides of Time sort of making his return back to Hearthstone at this point. Again, he took quite a long hiatus. There wasn't a lot of room for some strong deck building creativity. A lot of it was understanding the matchups and refining that process over and over again as players started to favor one particular way to approach an aggressive matchup. That's when the other side of that really came into play. There was a lot of different ways to play the aggro deck, so a lot of micromanagement. But Tides loves to brew himself up some decks. It's looking like in this one we're starting off with aggro Druid versus that control Paladin from Tides of Time. For HotMEOWTH, this is not a subtle strategy. It's about getting minions on board. It's about making the most of them. His big payoff is going to be finding Power of the Wild, a Mark of the Lotus, or a Savage Roar on a very wide board position, buy himself a lot of damage. For Tides of Time, it's pretty much the exact opposite. It's stop HotMEOWTH from doing that, and in the process, be able to scale to his ultra-powerful cards where he takes control of the game.
Yeah, and this is pretty much one of the highlights, I think, of this tournament. For me, from my perspective, has been how different the approaches are for all the players. I expected there being like a kind of a clear winner in terms of what people favored, aggro, control, and which one was going to be stronger. And as it turns out, a lot of people said, and it seems to, when you look at the lineups, line up with what they say, is that aggro is favored. The thing is, I've seen more control decks do well in the event so far than purely aggro lineups.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from what I was talking about right before this match started. It's the unrefinement of a lot of these builds. Here we see HotMEOWTH. He's running the Murloc package in this deck. It's got Finja, and the only other Murlocs are the 2 War Leaders and the 2 Bluegill Warriors. You want to ensure that you get a giant presence from the payoff of that card. But here it's starting to bog his hand down a little bit. Bluegill Warrior's not the best performer in this spot. This is going to water down his Finja should he draw that later on, but it's helping him get the job done. We see him land 2 Mark of Yashiraj in a row, and one right after the Aldor Peacekeeper. So he's been able to push a lot of damage here. This is really the turn where Tides of Time is tested. If he's not able to start really grasping control, that's when Savage Roar starts to become very dangerous.
Yeah, because you're paying 3 mana to effectively get 8 damage out. The 3 minion count is where that card becomes insane. At 2 minions is still really good, but at 3 minions, we're talking about 8 damage for 3 mana, and that is what the Druid wants to do as early as possible.
That's a very nice draw for HotMEOWTH as well. Wipes out the True Silver.
Yep, didn't get better.
Gets more presence on board. However, all he's got left is 2 Savage Roars. If Tides of Time pulls the trigger right here, Wild Pyromancer quality does it immediately. Suddenly, HotMEOWTH's entire game plan has been shut down.
And now HotMEOWTH shakes his head in disbelief as he picks up probably a Mark of the Lotus. No, it's a Firefly. That does something.
It's a great one to reload here. And you notice the Bluegill Warrior actually lived through this.
Right.
When a quality happens, it shifts the base health of all the minions to 1. The Murloc War Leader is then buffing that Bluegill Warrior up to 2 health, so it lives through the 1 damage of the Wild Pyromancer, and that's the kind of thing that can actually get him back in the game.
And HotMEOWTH with the Firefly is actually probably one of the best draws in his deck, given the hand texture he's got. The ability to generate 2 bodies off the draw instead of just the 1 body means that those Savage Roars are extremely good, and they're going to win the game right away.
I mean, Tides of Time shut this down, but the Firefly was the perfect pickup for HotMEOWTH to get back online. Just like that, game's over.
And Savage Roar, again, showing how powerful it can turn those small boards into. I mean, it's a bloodlust that costs half the cost in many respects. And when you're also doubling up on Power of the Wild, Mark of the Lotus in the same deck, you're guaranteed to find something to make those pushes happen.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes this deck does fall apart at the hinges. You don't get the right mix of minions and spells. Your opponent had strong ways to contest you. But if you do not stop this deck early on and it's able to find those big Mark of Yashiraj value turns, that's when things become super dangerous. The fact that HotMEOWTH had a second one, I think, is what really put him in this game.
Yeah, he got 2 cards off of the draw, Runner from the Engineered Raven, and denied the Elder Peacekeeper debuff. For the second one, which is also a big deal, letting him get a foothold on the board a little bit stronger. So he's going to get to replay that deck against the rest of Tides of Time's lineup. And I assume, you know, even though that deck, the Druid deck, is capable of degenerate aggression, it is still one of those decks that tends to falter on its own.
Wow, look at this.
Yeah.
Both crabs in HotMEOWTH's build so far. I'm curious if these are 1-ofs or 2-ofs. I saw Frozen with a build of this deck where he ran one of each of the crabs. HotMEOWTH's actually got both of them, and he kept Hungry Crab in his opening hand. He just kept it. Tides of Time's not running any Murlocs.
But the thing is, and this is what's important, these guys are bodies first and foremost. And in some matchups, they turn the game around, right, on their own, without you doing anything else. And in this case, the Galactic Crawler was clearly a decent keep, given that we're talking about Rogue. Hungry Crab, maybe less so, but I still can see a world in which you're just looking for the 1-2 body to stick around.
Well, you're looking for them as just big payoff cards. The one benefit that HotMEOWTH has to having copies of these cards in his deck is that they are beasts. So Mark of Yashiraj will buff them, and he gets to draw a card. We're looking at a wildly different opening in terms of the early game than we had with or prior to Journey to Angora.
Right.
At that stage, there's Tunnel Trogs everywhere, there's Totem Golems everywhere. Now 1-2s are actually fairly efficient bodies when it comes to fighting for those early stages. And that's why you see so many aggressive decks focused around minion synergy and actually buffing them up, just because they don't get chewed apart by Totem Goleming.
And honestly, it feels good to look at. It seems good to just see all these 1-2s that were unused finally see some niche play in the metagame. So Tides of Time running a Questing Adventurer in the Rogue deck. Now he's got a perfect hand to accompany this, to buff it up to absurd heights. He has the Swashbuckler to maybe strive for a new spell if he can get one with the preparation. He's got a turn here that will create one big minion, but that one guy has to get all the job done.
Yeah, I was hearing him talk about this last night, and he was saying that Miracle Rogue is favored against Quest Rogue, and a lot of people look at that and they go, really? There's no way that's the case. But Tides of Time mentioned this card specifically, Questing Adventurer. There's actually very few ways for Quest Rogue to interact effectively against Questing Adventurer. It's pretty much limited to Glacial Shard. Without that card, Questing Adventurer grows beyond the limitations that can typically handle, and you start seeing these very powerful openings as Tides of Time has right here. HotMEOWTH, I'm curious if he feels like he has to contest this, because it's already getting very large, and suddenly this is looking like it's demanding either both the minions in play or a Savage Roar or something.
Yeah, I don't know how good I feel about starting to trade into this. The question really is, does he have answers, right? Because he used one Swashbuckler, so the middle card and the rightmost card we know are Druid cards. So now the question HotMEOWTH's asking himself is, do these win him the game, or can I just continue going face? Because he cannot heal himself. And at the end of the day, that is what matters.
Wow. Look at this. He's going in.
He's got to respect
the buff from the Murloc War Leader, honestly, makes it a little bit less painful for him as well. You know, you're looking at Savage Roar would have been his other way to clear that. He might have taken 7 damage in the process. This way he keeps the 3/3 around. He's able to wipe out the threat of the Questing Adventurer and try to go into a rebuild spot. But this is where Tides of Time, if he can stabilize that board position, can take advantage of it. But just like last game, Savage Roar can completely change that outcome.
Yeah, Blood Mage Thanos is great. We've got the Starfall on its own with the Phantom Knives that can help here. So HotMEOWTH not going too wide on the board here, is going to opt to keep the Hungry Crab.
Not really much of an option. The Hungry Crab will eat his own Murloc War Leader in this spot. It's not an optional battle cry. In the patches, he's trying to save that for a turn. He either uses Mark of the Lotus or uses Savage Roar.
And now Tides of Time with the Vilespine Slayer. Yeah. Gets a really clean board clear.
The tides have turned.
Well done.
Vilespine Slayer is one of my favorite cards from this set.
Yeah, I was actually, when I was reviewing all the row cards for evaluation, I was looking at Vilespine Slayer and thinking, this has got to be the one card that makes aggro control a possibility again. Yeah. The ability to get on the board, tempo people out, and get a really sizable and powerful board clear almost doesn't work with damage anymore. You can't just rely on Eviscerates that need to connect to face sometimes, on your backstabs to get the job done. And this card is probably the saving grace of Miracle Rogue.
And look at the pace these guys are playing at. They have taken very little time to operate through their turns. And for HotMEOWTH, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, his game plan is simply deploy his minions, hope that he can find a big situation to buff them, and that's his big payoff. Here, Tides of Time, he has his answers straight away set up for him, but he's been putting very little thought into actually planning these turns, and that speaks a lot to how Tides is as a player. He's a very intuitive player. He trusts his instincts in these kinds of situations. They're guiding him through, and I mean, HotMEOWTH's board, it's torn apart at this point. That Starfall from Swashbuckler was massive against the small minions HotMEOWTH had, and I don't see where he's going to win this game without Living Mana.
I was going to say Living Mana is one of the few cards in the deck that can still bring him back. And I'm talking bringing him back full force. Picking up a beast here with Menagerie Warden could be kind of good.
Oh, Druid of the Claw is actually a fantastic card for Tides of Time to pick up. He puts this in Taunt. He gets a copy next to a Menagerie Warden. Suddenly, a card like Living Mana looks like it might be checkable in some instances.
Yeah, you're taking up at least, you know, a little bit under half the minions on the board with the one Druid of the Claw. Let's not even talk about the Menagerie Warden. Looks like HotMEOWTH's going to be, quote-unquote, playing around it. Yeah. Having to trade into that 4/6 at some point.
He's got to stop this pressure somehow. If he starts to just get himself clocked really early, that's when he doesn't have time to actually find Living Mana. So his purpose here is to expend this Savage Roar and quite literally draw Living Mana. That's his next big push that he can possibly have. And for that to happen, he has to have time. And that's why Tides of Time, in a blistering pace, once again, just developing as much power as he can so he can clock HotMEOWTH better.
And for a matchup that is supposed to be good for the aggro deck, looks like Tides of Time is picking up the right answers. And I'll say something about Rogue as well. You're looking at Miracle Rogue as one of those decks that had its own game plan and it did things in a very predictable manner. Now with Swashbuckler and Hallucination in the deck, they get to take a little bit of, they get to borrow some tools from your own toolkit. And sometimes that's easy to use against you. Yeah. Which is precisely why I think Miracle Rogue is so flexible right now, or so good, because of its flexibility.
It just offers a lot of strong like counterplay to what your opponents are doing. You have to use the flexible tools effectively, but sometimes those tools are just super effective. And in Tide's case, he won this game turns ago when HotMEOWTH has board crippled, and Tides of Time was free to just have any minion be a significant threat at this point. HotMEOWTH, he's dead next turn.
Yeah, and we looked at the development of the game, right? The Questing Adventurer, quote-unquote, all-in from Tides of Time. The 7/7 was big enough that HotMEOWTH had to respect it.
Oh, yeah.
But also so big that he had to throw too many resources. Even though he had the buff from the War Leader, at the end of the day, it still hurt to throw minions in there, because your goal is to have them stick, buff them up, and push damage. So if the Rogue is slowing you down, you just end up losing. Yeah,
and just like that, Tides of Time evens up the series, and now we're at 1 apiece. So HotMEOWTH on deck to queue up to try to counter what Tides of Time has brought. DreamHack, the Grand Prix here are last hero standing. The player who wins with their deck gets to keep it. So it's on the responding player to try to take advantage of that. Typically, game 1 is a very paramount game to win because of the way the counters can line up. They counter your deck, then you counter it right back, so on and so forth.
You get the last word being the first guy who wins the game.
Yeah, it's drastically different lineup building than you see with Conquest, where players are trying to target one specific deck very often and have that be the focal weak point of their opponent's strategy. In Last Hero Standing, you typically see players get a little bit more creative and at times just play very powerful strategies that are meant to push their opponents out of the game.
All right, now we're looking for Edwin on Tide's side as we have the double coin prep opener. That would be a card could change the way this game goes.
Yeah, this is a tough matchup for Tides of Time. With Miracle Rogue, you're often looking to simply respond to what your opponent's doing, and when you find that tempo turn, it's often enough to get a threat going and disrupt what your opponent's attack plan is. But for HotMEOWTH, his attack plan is straight for the throat. All his deck wants to do is pile on damage. With 2 Arcanite Reapers and with Fiery War Axe, Arcanite Reapers can be a bit of a liability here, but Tides of Time has very few ways to actually protect himself from these kinds of attacks.
Yeah, Swashbuckler in this case can come in handy. Number 1 brings out patches. Number 2 could give you armor generation like Ali Armor Smith, shield block, who knows, a little bit of health gain from the warrior side. And if you get a big taunt, sometimes that's just enough to get you through.
Yeah, he has 2 copies of Counterfeit Coin in his hand. Those will help fuel him to the Arcane Giant. Something big that is defensive is what Tides is hoping for from these Swashbucklers.
All right.
And Warrior has quite a few of those options. You know, you mentioned Ali Armorsmith, but there's a lot of tools that can do the job as well.
Yeah, we've got the 3/6 with Taunt in the mid game. We've got even a Public Defender is good enough to stall just a bit. I'll take a 0/7 that heals me. That's fine.
7 extra life.
Yeah.
And in this spot, it's really interesting. Tides of Time going to forego the Swashbucklers here. I still think there's some hope for him on the Questing Adventurer or the Edwin Van Cleef front. And that would be the big reason to hang on to those Swashbucklers in this spot. He gets to use a little bit of value out of his dagger, and at the same time, if he draws one of those big threats, it means that it's just going to grow that much more.
Yeah, I really like that line of play, keeping the Swashbucklers as they're not mandatory just yet. Inner Rage helps clean up the board a little bit for later, set up bigger damage output turns if he wants to keep it for those.
Ooh.
Well, speaking of the devil, we got a turn 4 Ornery Direhorn if we want one.
Yeah, that's an interesting card here, too. One of the big benefits I think Tides of Time could see off that is in the face of a clean board, he could nab Divine Shield, disrupt the attacks from Arcanite Reaper a little bit more, or maybe even just +3 health, require some more attention from HotMEOWTH. Either way, that is a defensive tool I think that's likely to be paramount if he's going to win.
So we're looking at Tides of Time's side, but we haven't really talked about HotMEOWTH. Against Rogue, the hand that HotMEOWTH is packing right now is at some point going to win.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, he's got, you know, no minions, but in general, if you get to connect weapons to face repeatedly, that's sufficient. Now, the taunt is going to be a bit of a liability in that case for HotMEOWTH, as he just gave one away, basically, through Swashbuckler to his opponent. And that's a bit tough, because then you end up clocking your opponent 1 turn less with the Reapers, and suddenly they get time to gather the resources to kill you with Eviscerates and whatnot. Well,
that's the big thing about playing an aggressive deck, is that your game plan is fairly predictable. So Tides of Time knows exactly what direction he needs to go if he's going to win this game. In this case, he's going to get on board very early on. He's using the backstab plus the Inner Rage. That fuels his Giant a little bit more. It allows him to use these coins to get out Ornery Direhorn. I mean, suddenly you're looking at back-to-back fairly big drops from Tides of Time. Get the +1/+1, and that's just more disruption.
Just out of range of the Reaper. That's the important part. It's just enough health to survive a single hit of the Reaper.
This is too many minions that HotMEOWTH's drawn. You know, this is the other side of playing aggressive decks, is that they do have to take risks with some of their deck building. And a lot of times those risks are fairly nominal. It's can you draw too many of your good cards? And in this case, that's definitely what's happening. 2 Arcanite Reapers, that is 4 turns just for Arcanite Reaper swings. 2 more for the Fiery War Axe. If he wants to get full N'Zoth's first mate value, it's 2 more swings from that. He's not going to have time to do that. You do have to clock the aggro decks back, and typically that just means anything big will get the job done. That's why this deck plays Arcane Giant.
Yeah, and that is also one of these spots for HotMEOWTH where if he had another Pirate, his turns would look a little bit less clunky. I mean, in this case, what is obvious, he's going to have to face tank that minion twice.
That is 18 damage.
Yeah, it does make, however, for what it's worth, your Bloodcell Cultist contest it. If there's no answer to that Cultist, you don't have to take another hit from it if you don't want to.
So that damage is going to pile up awfully quickly, though.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's not a good draw, though.
Yeah, well, you can still kill the 3/4 with the Eviscerate and the dagger hit with a 1/1.
He needed anything to add to the board and Eviscerate strictly for tempo on this turn. If Tides of Time had that, you'd be looking at a very quick close. Instead, he draws what's probably the worst card in his deck. He doesn't need the second Arcane Giant to deliver the damage necessary, and it does nothing to help him on the Eviscerate front. So now Tides has to make a decision. Does he want to take some damage and kill this right now, or does he want to save this Eviscerate and try to maybe close 1 turn earlier as a result of it? Because currently he's got a big clock. He's lacking a little bit of damage to get the job done. I think it's wise to go ahead and kill this Cultist.
I mean, number one, it's protecting you against the other Cultist. It's also preventing Frothing Berserkers from growing. That's also a problem you have.
It's dealing 6 damage. Your opponent's got to attack through your Ornery Direhorn.
Exactly. So they have to face tank this. So effectively, you're translating the Eviscerate's 4 damage into a guaranteed 6.
Well, that's a big pickup for HotMEOWTH. I mean, suddenly you're looking at some real race potential, even against the Arcane Giant here. I think there's some major consideration for Mortal Strike on this turn for HotMEOWTH, so that way he just doesn't have to take that damage. Because what you're looking at here is Mortal Strike and the Ornery Direhorn. He stays at 16 health. You're looking at 3 turns of attacks from weapons plus Leroy Jenkins.
Oftentimes it does it. The issue is, do you want to develop the Reaper now? Because technically you could attack, take the damage, put yourself in Mortal Strike range for what it's worth, and then set up the Reaper and start pushing. But then you're dead to like any big minion that comes out, which granted, there aren't too many of them. There's only the Giants, but based on how slowly Tides of Time has been playing this is either a Gadgetzan type card, you know, it's got to be like one of those really weird mid-game plays that he hasn't been able to do, or it's one of those Giants.
Yeah, I think you would have been likely to simply see Gadgetzan Auctioneer on the following turn, or on the previous turn, but that's exactly what HotMEOWTH's thinking. You know, maybe it's a sap, maybe it's a preparation, maybe it is an Arcane Giant, but is that a risk he's willing to take at this point? And
can I play around it?
Yeah, it looked like he was, and so now he's really put to the test. Without a Heroic Strike or without a Salcy Deckhand, I'm not sure HotMEOWTH gets there this game.
All right, so next turn, he can push 5 now, so the Rogue's down to 16, then he's got 6 from the Mortal Strike, so that's a total of 16 he's able to push guaranteed. So even Heroic Strike does not quite cut it.
He's off.
Yeah. So
I just think his hand was too clunky this game, and it's tough for a deck that caps out at 3 total 5-cost cards for that to be the case, but you certainly can suffer as a result of that.
Leroy's unplayable lest you die, so you're playing this when you're killing them, and that's about it. I guess a Dread Corsair draw would be insane, right? If you go Arcanite Reaper and pick up a Dread Corsair off the top, that gives you 1 turn against the taunts if nothing else comes out.
It might be too late at this point, too. I mean, HotMEOWTH, where does he actually win via this? I mean, the Arcane Giant is a 2-turn clock. He has to kill Tides of Time with this turn and the following. Are there any outs to do that at this point?
If that Buzzsail Cultist was a Dread Corsair, I would say yes, because then you can pick up the other Dread Corsair off the top, buy yourself an extra turn, and then win on the back of that. But now that this is an actual 3-4 for 3 that doesn't do anything else, yeah, I'm not so sure anymore.
So his game plan's deviated. He's hoping that he can armor up outside of the range of nominal burst spells, and that he can actually use Mortal Strike plus the Cultist next turn to actually kill this Arcane Giant. But the Vile Spine Slayer draw is going to completely deny that, and then even the second Arcane Giant would have done the same. Tides of Time locked up this game when he had that Ornery Direhorn stick around. And
this is one of the power, like the reasons why Swashbuckler is considered one of the highest win rate cards in Rogue in general. Sure, it brings out patches, that's a big point, but the fact that it can save you games you otherwise can't win. We're talking about aggressive decks, not something Rogue is especially good at fighting off against, as they have no healing. But when you get a free tool that you don't play and it's taunt or it's healing or some more burst, you can end the game quicker or stop it from ending.
It's a 1-mana 1/1 that potentially gives you a tool to operate with. In that game, the Inner Rage played a role, as did the Ornery Direhorn. The Ornery Direhorn was just, it was a major disruption effect, but it also provided big damage to Tides that game. You know, that's one of the weaknesses of aggressive decks, is that they don't overwhelm you. They typically have very few ways to actually stop the damage you present against them. It's not merely a matter of taking control and keeping control. A lot of it has to do with being able to turn that corner, present that big threat that they have trouble handling.
Is the counter push, really, that's the most important part of a matchup against aggro. And you've got to identify it as well. We've seen some players in the past be a bit too cautious about when they want to push back. Sometimes it's easy to identify, sometimes it's a little bit more nuanced, especially when you're erring on the mid-range side of a control deck. Yeah. Suddenly it's a little bit more difficult to figure out when you have to stop taunting up.
And that was a big game to talk about too, because Tides of Time just beat one of his worst matchups with Miracle Rogue. He defeated an outright pure aggressive deck. And now HotMEOWTH, he was unwilling to play Paladin into this Miracle Rogue in the first game. Is this second game going to pay off for him? It looks like he's a little bit more on the mid-range side with Stampeding Kodo, so I would expect a few less Murlocs and a little bit more top end and some utility stuff. I'm thinking of Aldor Peacekeeper being a big one that comes to mind, but Aldor Peacekeeper only does so much of a job versus a card like Questing Adventurer. It will continue to grow.
Grows back up. And preparation with Dino Size is quite amusing. It's not a play that I've ever seen yet, but it's a fun play, because just looking at it, I'm thinking, well, okay, that comes out on turn 5. So if you have a minion set up, that's a huge damage push the Paladin has to answer. Now they have Terrain, they have Aldors, they've got the ability to negate that with Equality if they have it in the deck. But that's a pretty interesting pickup.
Yeah, the big deal to me is the fact that it's the instant damage that you could buy from it. You know, that's something that HotMEOWTH is not going to be anticipating this game. And that's another one of the benefits of Swashbuckler, is oftentimes the tools you get from it are fairly hidden. There's almost no way for him to read Dino Size being a part of Tides of Time's range. You know, if he can manage to sniff that out, which is again almost impossible. Excuse me, it's almost impossible just thinking about it. Oh, but you know, that's a play he largely will have no counterplay to. It'll involve him just simply setting up a big taunt minion to disrupt any potential damage like that from Tides of Time.
Yeah. You can get some reads throughout the game, like, okay, it's not True Silver Champion because he would have done it here. It's not Hammer of Wrath because he would have done it here. It's not Blessing of Kings because it was pretty good here. But then at some point, you end up narrowing it down. It feels like, okay, it's unplayable. It's just a card he does not want to play.
It could very easily be, you know, Lay on Hands.
Lay on Hands, for instance,
or Avenging Wrath, or just something he just never had a chance to utilize. And HotMEOWTH having a bit of a tough turn here, doesn't want to use his coin because his hand is so heavy, and I think rightfully so. In this spot, if for whatever reason this 1/1 lived, he'd have a great spot in front of him. But Tides of Time, he's going to smell weakness with that, and he's immediately going to go for the throat with this Questing Adventurer. Now, the one risk Tides is taking here is in the face of coin and True Silver Champion, but that's not there for HotMEOWTH, and that spells trouble.
Yeah, there could be an Aldor Peacekeeper, you know, to negate this and maybe set up a Kodo on the following turn, but it's still not there. HotMEOWTH's got nothing but a small taunt to put in the way of the Questing, and these are the types of games where the Questing Adventurer, as a single card, takes away everything.
Yeah, it's a high-risk, high-reward card. It requires a lot of synergy built into your deck, but when you get that big payoff, it's suddenly a daunting minion to fight against. Every single turn, this is going to threaten to get larger and larger. HotMEOWTH has to find a way to stop this pressure, and right now the tools are not there.
I really like the Abomination pickup here. The other ones were, you know, acceptable and reasonable, but the most important part about A-Bomb is it will stop the questing, potentially, and then deal more damage to it. So effectively, it's a 6-4 against the questing adventurer only,
Here's
for what it's worth.
No effect. I mean, Tides has almost no interest in using his hero power at this point. It's going to be Eviscerates to clear the way for the 10 power he has on board, which will also continue to grow. I'm not sure HotMEOWTH wins this game from this spot.
Well, there could still be an equality in there to put up maybe one turn later. You know, he's on 4 mana. He needs a little bit more than that, and that is bad. That is bad news.
And all of these options are viable in one form or another. Honestly, Holy Wrath just being representing damage might be the take here for Tides of Time, but maybe Sunkeeper Tarim is just a backup. You know, I don't even think he needs this card to win the game. He's got Eviscerate coming, and that's going to push a lot more damage. Yeah. This is largely an inconsequential effect here, but the thing about it is it's activating Eviscerate, which is buying him 4 more damage from the second copy.
I would say Holy Wrath just because you're likely to be so aggressive now that you might need the game to close by 2 or 3 points of damage, and it's one of those things that you might as well. At this point, I think this pick is going to be largely inconsequential.
Plus, you have Arcane Giant in your deck.
Okay, we're going to go for Sunkeeper.
Yeah, I think just having a backup plan in case things get out of control is a good idea.
And you're pushing 12 this turn.
That's a lot.
Well, 13 with a dagger.
Do you know what I would do to push 12 points of damage? You know what I'd do for a 50% chance to push 12 points of damage?
Okay. Here's a card that maybe saves the day. For now. I mean, it helps. It doesn't save the day completely, but it helps a lot.
Again, it stunts the immediate damage from it, but that's a card that always threatens to grow. So if Tides of Time finds another way to activate combo here, he's once again going to pull very far ahead.
And that is one of those. That is one of those combo enablers. The Fan of Knives is able to be played simply for the purpose of enabling Eviscerate and buffing the questing adventurer in this spot. No doubt we'll see that come out.
It's also fueling that Arcane Giant. HotMEOWTH, again, his hand's very clunky. Every single threat is a big deal to him right now.
It's interesting how a lot of people favor Quest Rogue, but I feel like of all the players who chose to bring...
Is that lethal?
I believe 4
it is,
damage. Yeah, it is lethal.
Questing Adventurer grows. That'll do it.
Well, that was a swift Rogue cleanup.
And that's exactly what happens when Questing Adventurer goes unchecked. It will end games. It's so important to be able to handle this style of card. And Tides of Time choosing it right now in the midst of everything that's been happening. You're looking at Quest Rogue being a big deal. You're looking at the Gadgets and Auctioneer decks not typically running this style of threat, instead of relying on Arcane Giant or Edwin Van Cleef to get the job done. We didn't even see a Gadgets and Auctioneer in Tides of Time's decks.
No, it might not even be in there because it's too slow as that you're looking to go on and on and on about your cycle. I've seen a lot of people actually run Sprint nowadays as like a 1 of or 2 of, simply to make sure that they get the card draw the Gadget Center would provide, except they also have the option of going all in without needing to keep the 0-cost spells.
Yeah, I see the players just talking about the match. That's the atmosphere I've also noticed here at DreamHack, is that all the players are, it's a lot about camaraderie. It's about discussing what ended up happening in the match. Is there anything I could have done better? Like, why did you choose that particular deck? There's a lot of choices that factor into these styles of tournaments, and all that information eventually it goes around and it hits the next circle, and that's when you see those metagames start to evolve. It's because of that shared information that takes place with these guys. It's just fantastic to see.
I mean, we're looking at all the deck lists that we saw, right? At any point in Ungoro, I feel like all those decks, one after the other, got like a quick succession of success. A lot of people liked Miracle Rogue, and then they said, no, Quest Rogue's better. And then suddenly Miracle Rogue's popping back up. Its win rate is on average a little bit more consistent for the players who piloted perfectly than Quest Rogue. So it looks like we have another match for this 6th round of Swiss. Frozen versus the King from Clash.
Yeah, I would guess Viking is where he's headed with that one.
I'm pretty sure that was a reference, yeah. I don't think this guy was the King of V.
I don't think so either. And Frozen, a player he's been having a little bit of struggle here so far at DreamHack. He's picked up 2 losses. You know, he's still eligible to make that top 16 cut, but these are the high pressure matches where players can start to get eliminated. At that 2-loss mark, you start fearing that next match. And you know, I spoke to him after round 1. He wasn't super excited about how the games went for him, but Vikings got a 1-0 lead here over Frozen as we jump into the middle of this game. Again, this is a Swiss tournament. All these rounds are taking place currently, and it's looking like his situation not the greatest spot for him.
Yeah, so going back a little bit here, you know, the reason we're at 1-0 in the match is because we're playing Swiss, so all the games are ongoing at the same time, so we're jumping in occasionally after we're done with the round into a game that is already in progress. In this case, Frozen seems to be on Ramp Druid with a Curator, possibly a Stonehill Defender, as he's got a second copy. I assume that's where this came from, and so is able to fetch even more Anacondas and big minions like Deathwing.
Yeah, Frozen's deck is actually really interesting. The Anaconda puts a 5 power or greater minion into play, or is it 5? It's 5 power, right?
5 or more, yeah, 5 attack.
Well, on its Death Rattle, it puts a 5 power or more minion into play. So this deck oftentimes wants to just simply ramp into these giant style of effects and then produce very large board presence via that powerful Death Rattle. In this case, he actually doesn't have anything to put into play from it, and Tyrion is getting slammed down this turn. And Tyrion, a huge draw for Viking in this spot. But Frozen's deck just simply not producing at this stage. The second copy of Curator is fairly dead at this point.
It's pretty good. It draws a 12-12, and then you get the 12-12 on the board through the Anaconda. That can make work happen.
Well, how did that first Curator get into play then?
I don't know.
Where's that 12?
I'm feeling the spectator mode is glitched on the top side. Because I was thinking maybe he's running Stonehill Defender in the list.
Yeah,
to have the Curator. But in this case, it looks like the top spectating is a little bit bugged out on us.
Actually, you're totally right, because we haven't seen his card draw at this point. So we'll get that fixed as quickly as we can. But
yes.
an Iron Beak Owl.
Can I just say, by the way, that
holy mackerel,
four players I've spoken to brought back the Owl to the tournament, and they say that it's been an MVP against their matches against Paladin. It's been working amazingly well against Taunt Warrior when they need to go through for the last push of damage. I've been very surprised, but it seems like the Owl is back potentially in meta.
Well, it certainly played a big role here, but still under a lot of pressure. So again, ignore Frozen's hand on the top side of the screen. We do have a spectator bug in place, and we apologize for that. We'll get it fixed as quickly as we can. So everything Frozen's playing is coming as a surprise to us at this point. He's slamming Ysera in the face of all this damage. No way to actually check it.
And now Viking, let's call him Viking. I'm gonna go with that.
Only 9 damage to push, and he just drew one of the worst cards in his deck.
Yeah, and the worst part is if Ysera picked up, you know, Ysera Awakens, the Druid's not even dead. Usually what you want to do is put it so that if they do go for Ysera Awakens to clean up, they're dead on the back of it. But in this case, there's no lethal presented on Frozen if you push all the damage. So very awkward turn for Viking.
Yeah, I was looking at, when we came back to this, I was like, man, Frozen's hand's really bad. I don't know what happened here, but again, that spectator bug. So I don't know how many cards are in Frozen's hand. We're trying to get updates as quickly as we can. And again, we apologize for the technical difficulty here. And we thank you for being patient with us. But no, this is not a bad position for Frozen. This is instead looking very good. Yeah,
it really depends, though, on what the Ysera gave, right? Because there are no taunts in there. There could be a Nightmare. All of this is kind of awful. Well, Grimscale Chum saying, hey, what's up, dude?
What's up, guys?
Want to be friends?
No, you're a Grimscale Chum.
Oh, the Nourish draw. If there's a swipe in there, that could be insane.
Goodness, this has got to be bad news.
Yeah, well, the Wrath here is, yeah, I don't know about the Wrath here. I mean, it's got to be one of the cards you're looking for because you're looking for swipe, but... Well,
this is looking like a fairly weak turn. I mean, not a lot of progress here made by Frozen, so his hand could be fairly weak. I mean, that's a lot of board pressure that just went completely unchecked. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage.
I mean, there's got to be another Earthen Scales in the deck, potentially, right? They tend to run 2 copies to slap onto those 12-12s.
Oh, we came in midway through this game, so it's tough to say. Viking closing in, though. And, you know, again, you cannot underestimate the overwhelming power of overwhelming stupidity. And that's what a lot of Murlocs are. They just keep chipping away, and they keep chipping away.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say there's Primordial Drake in the hand after the amount of Nourishes. I can't imagine they were played yet, because that board was way too full for a game that went with Primordial Drakes involved. The board was way too full for that, for my taste. All right, here we go.
Oh, wow.
And that's the swing turn Frozen was looking for. Get a full clear at 5 health.
Add a big threat, and suddenly Viking really on the back foot here. His Tyrion getting silenced by that Ironbeak Owl was a devastating effect, and now you're seeing that come to fruition. Frozen would be dead if it wasn't for that Ironbeak Owl.
Choose our champion wins the game still, but...
Well, it's a big road bump.
Yeah.
It's a lot of life he'll buy over the next couple turns, but is that time going to get him out of this? You know, piece by piece, Frozen's going to recover that life total.
I don't think Frozen right now, based on what we're looking at, can kill the Stegodon from this. From the hand that we're not seeing, The Stegodon could live and help push a bit more damage with the Blessing of Kings, with a True Server Champion on top of that.
A lot of Ysera cards have been drawn, though.
Yeah. Could be a Nightmare.
Could be a Dream.
Yeah, you could Dream that minion. That'd be good. Could just be a bunch of Laughing Sisters.
I'm going to guess Dream's not there, because I imagine Frozen would have instantaneously cast that, and there we get a glimpse at his hand.
And they said, well, Anaconda doesn't bring out much.
Well, there's nothing defensive in his hand, though. Everything is just a big value card. So he's having to fight this board state fairly honestly.
You know what I'm thinking? I think you're nightmaring that Ysera to kill the Stegodon. I think you're nightmaring, like, you can't let any minion survive on this board.
Here's the thing. Frozen has way more than enough value to actually close this game.
Right.
He's totally okay with making this sacrifice to make sure that he's not dying to True Silver's Champion, that he's not dying to Blessing of Kings in this spot. And honestly, I have to give props to Frozen for that. Oftentimes you're in these situations and you don't want to make that big sacrifice, but I think it's gonna be paramount to his win here.
And it looks like that's gonna be game as Viking is facing down Lethal on board and Frozen is gonna win with Ram Druid. I'm happy that we're finally getting to cast a Ram Druid game.
Well, this is right in Frozen's wheelhouse too. He loves to play these decks that have giant payoff cards. And Ram Druid is already one of his favorite classes, and he's known for his combo play within that style. But here, it's a very different kind of combo. You know, we've seen this big shift in Hearthstone where the combo decks, you typically know what's really happening. You know, in this case, the combo is simply ramp up your mana, start playing big stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, once it gets executed and it comes down and it works, the feeling of satisfaction is unbelievable.
Yep, so we're heading into Freeze Mage versus this Ramp Druid deck. And this isn't like the same Freeze Mage we've been seeing over and over again. I've been seeing more and more often them turning to these early game value cards to really get the job done. You know, Babbling Book, you know, oftentimes they have like primordial glyphs, and their whole goal is just to piece together enough stuff to disrupt the opponent and then deliver those final points of damage. I believe it was Sottle on Twitter. He was calling it for it to be called Discover Mage.
Yeah, Discover Mage is a good name since they tend to run Cabal Courier. If we're talking about that specific type of list where, like, when you have only Babbling Book and you've got one Kabbalist Tome in some weird list and the glyphs, it's not quite a Discover Mage. But once you start adding in the couriers, your deck becomes whatever you want it to be. And so you tailor it to the matchup, and that's actually why the deck is so good.
Yeah, I mean, a big benefit of that is just that Mage cards are very powerful. So even if they're just random Mage cards, you can oftentimes find some sort of situation to use them. Here, Viking's just off to a very fast start with Mana Worm and Arcanologist, but he naturally drew one of the Icebox that he threw back. And so that's little bit less than one card he's operating with to get things underway here, because Frozen's game plan is simply to outscale all of this early stuff that Viking's doing. He needs some minor disruption to keep the pressure at bay, and then eventually just rely on super powerful minions to get the job done. Oftentimes at that stage, Frozen will have more than stabilized the board, and Viking just won't have the hope of closing because Frozen's cards are so powerful. But the one weakness to that is a lot of wide board pressure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about Frozen's deck, that once it gets those big guys, not only does it kill you fast, but it also heals fast, because Earthen Scale suddenly gives them a massive boost to armor from 9 to 10 to 12 to 13. We've seen a ton of armor gain happen in that deck. The big issue is getting to those turns. With Innervate and Coin, I'm not worried. I think he can do it. I'm not too worried that he's going to be able to get there. The big issue, of course, is how much damage will he have taken by the point?
Yeah, that's really the big question to ask is, can he actually deliver those big minions before the damage is simply too much? And so from his perspective, that Earthen Scales in hand is a very key card. +1/+1, and then you gain armor equal to that minion's power. So his game plan is just to continue ramping, hoping that his minions don't get easily checked, and that there's not a big amount of follow-up damage or card draw from Viking. That's a tall order for your game plan, is to hope your opponent just basically has a bunch of dead cards.
And one of the key things as well about Frozen's deck is the Anaconda. You know, even though people talk about it like it's this optional card, right? It's like, oh, you can get Anaconda giving you big guys. The truth is, you're mostly going to get those big guys with your Anaconda. So by making this play here, what Frozen is doing is he's saying, all right, we have Karen in the deck. We've got potentially, I don't know if he's running Black Knight. We've got some minions we can play right off the top. We've got Swipes, we've got Ras, we've got Nourish. And what we want to do as quickly as possible is simply get the Anaconda on curve. And he's going to need that mana to play minions naturally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of playing with Druid, too. I remember speaking with Amnesiac about this a little while back before his World Championship appearance, where him and Chalky were practicing Rogue, and he said, you don't just play with the cards in your hand, you play with the cards in your deck.
Exactly, and that is what this deck does.
Yeah, Druid is largely dependent on its draw density, and that's why the ramp is so powerful, is the cards you draw tend to be very big. On this turn, though, it was hero power go. That's the kind of turn that can set him so far behind that he doesn't have that big recovery potential. Is Curator enough to get this done?
I mean, it's going to be able to soak up a fireball at the very least, or maybe in Great Arcane Missiles, we see whether or not things land properly. But what this
Primordial Drake.
Yeah. We're looking for, again, an Earthen Scale. I cannot stress this enough. Yeah. That is the win condition at this
Look
stage.
at this Greater Arcane Missiles. The discount from this Sorcerer's Apprentice is potentially huge. Lands 2 of them. So I don't think Frozen's winning this game.
I mean, you'd need a 7-drop like Anaconda into...
He needs to rip that Arcane Missiles right now. It's not often that 3 damage to face is enough, but when you're staring at Fireball...
I mean, Anaconda, with the scales, doesn't give him enough life to survive. So he's going to have to go for that Primordial Drake. Assumes he's dead.
Yeah, this is his only hope, is to get a big minion on board and hope it's enough. But the early pressure was way too much for him to handle, and I think the game count must have been wrong on screen because Frozen is taking off the equipment there, so is Viking. I'm guessing that's match.
It would seem so. I've never seen other 2 players take off their headsets otherwise, so.
Yeah. Especially not get up and get ready to handshake either. He's like, yeah, great game 2, get ready for game 3.
Are you ready for game 3? Yeah, okay, let's get back in the game. Booting up my client.
Yeah, so that's going to do it. Viking's going to take the match, and I believe that now puts Frozen at 3 match losses for the event. Certainly not the performance he was looking for here. Coming right off of a 2nd place finish at the Bahamas for the Winter Championship. He's been such a fantastic performer, but now that we've gotten to this point, whew, man, it has been a little bit rough. But Viking, that early pressure was so big, and that's one of the reasons that mage deck has started to become popular, is when it gets starts like that, TJ, you once told me Mana Worm was the key to Mage Paradise.
The key that unlocks the door to Mage Paradise. Close.
Get the Waygate?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was game 4.
Same.
We all thought that.
Yeah.
We were bamboozled.
Yeah, but I was just out there checking up on some players for round 6. Everybody's starting to get a little tired. The players starting to lose focus. I've heard a lot of players like saying, "Oh, I was like taking notes and I made a misplay because somehow I looked and I wrote down my notes." He's like, "Oh, he's played 3 Wraths." Like,
that seems wrong.
It is nuts, but that's one of the skills that separates a lot of these players is being able to stay focused. That endurance in a long event like this. A lot of these players have been here for 12 hours now, playing Hearthstone for 10 of it. That endurance really plays a factor. It's part of the success.
Yeah. You have to have strong mental acuity to make it through these long rounds. I think it's another one of the big benefits of Swiss players, the players who are more experienced in that style of play, the ones who have had the most practice and have the ability to maintain that focus are the ones who typically are going to make it through more often. It's almost just as important as building the right lineup and understanding the matchups.
Yeah, a couple updates. There's still a few matches going on over there, but Chalky, we've been checking in on his story all day. He was 4-1 going into round 6.
Okay.
So he lost his round, the last match against Ryder. So Ryder came in this round 5-0.
Was it Ryder, the Control Shaman creator from this expansion? I feel like I've seen him create a...
One of them, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
And Dog, still, I feel like his match was still ongoing as well. He's a player that was 5-0 as well going into round 6. So his match was still ongoing, at least the last time I checked. So still a little bit going, but everybody's pretty much wrapping up now.
I mean, the matches
over there about 10 minutes ago.
Matches we've had on broadcast were just so fast. I mean, Tides of Time, he always typically plays very fast, but he was closing out these games. You know, he's trying to create these board stabilizing points, but HotMEOWTH just playing pure aggro decks. You know, once that big threat got online, that was lights out.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, it's starting to wrap up the day here. Round 6 coming to a close, and we're done with the broadcasting matches. Any highlights, Noxious, from day number 1 of the DreamHack Austin Grand Prix?
I remember Swashbuckler with a swipe. That was a big deal. That was one of those games that I remember. And I want to say maybe the Miracle Rogue from Tides. We didn't get to see much of it, but Frozen's Ram Druid was also one of those decks that I was happy to see. And of course, all the Priest action. I mean, honestly, the whole Dragon Priest performing so well across the event has been a delight to see.
Admirable, any highlights from you for the day?
To me, one of the most memorable moments was just Ostkaka instantly queuing up Quest Rogue into Pirate Warrior. And you and I were going, what on earth is he doing?
Yeah.
The Locker Crawler's there right away. He utilizes Wisps to activate a quest early on. He goes wide on board with a bunch of 1/1s to set up a kill 1 turn before Crane could return that damage. Like, the foresight of that game plan and the experience he has in that moment, I think really stands out to me as how much this guy actually practiced and understands the game.
Yeah, flood the board set at the lethal next turn. It was really beautiful to watch. Some of the highlights for me, just seeing the variety, you know, early on in the event. So it was pretty cool. But day one has come to a close. Day two is going to return tomorrow. We'll broadcast the last 3 rounds of Swiss, as well as getting in to that top 16. We're going to have a little bit later start time tomorrow. It's going to be noon Central Time. So that's 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I believe that's 7 p.m. Central European Standard Time for the Europeans that might be watching at this crazy hour. I think I'm correct. I think I'm correct. But that's when we'll return. It's been a fun day one here at DreamHack. 2 more days to go until we crown a champion. So for myself and everybody here at DreamHack, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.